Somizi is one of the most successful people in our country. He's a very gifted person, very talented person. And I recently watched a video of him and his daughter interacting about Christianity and African spirituality. And what I admired from Somizi was the way that he allowed his daughter to choose her own spiritual journey without imposing his African spirituality on her. Of course, we know his daughter is a Christian and he believes in African spirituality, but it was nice to see this dialogue where his daughter was standing firm on what she believes, but yet at the same time, we saw Somizi, clearly saying that he believes in African spirituality, venerating the ancestors, and that he would like his daughter to, but at the same time, allowing her to choose that journey. So it's something that we can all learn from as parents, and even Christian parents, to say, well, what if your daughter or son chooses to follow African spirituality and not Christianity? How should you relate with them? You know, there should be an element of freedom that is allowed to them to practice whatever they believe in, but at the same time, you're still praying for them, you're still encouraging them to become Christian and so on. So in this video, we're going to be reacting to a discussion that he had with Gogo Dineo. We know, obviously, Gogo Dineo is somebody who is trying to merge Christianity with African spirituality. She's somebody who opens her Bible and then throws bones when she's consulting. And so in this video, really, Somizi expresses his reasons why he doesn't embrace the Bible. And fundamentally, he's saying he rejects the Bible because it's a book that's written to him, but it's not about him. In other words, he doesn't see himself in the biblical narrative, and therefore he feels like he should reject Christianity. And so fundamentally, what we have here is the question of who am I? That's what Somizi wants to be affirmed by the Bible. Is my dignity as a Black African person affirmed in the Bible? And so if it's not, then he feels a need to then, move on to African spirituality. And he feels like that will be better affirmed if he then goes back to his traditions, venerating ancestors and so on. So let's watch the video and then we're going to give our response as we usually do.
What is it that defines Somizi as Ntomnyama? I think what defines Somizi as a Black man is the foundation plays a huge role, and it's something that I pride myself in terms of having to have seen the day where I am fully proud of who I am and where I come from, my culture, my traditions, my practices. I think I would be no more if I did not find that part of me. And by no more, I don't mean I would be dead. I would still be alive, but I wouldn't be alive. Living. So what defines me is all those things that I know for sure. I have a sense of belonging. I know where I belong. That's the most beautiful thing. I know where I come from, and I know where I'm going, and I know where I'm at. I am conscious of I'm aware of where I'm at and the things that are around me. And before, I didn't know, and I thought I was okay. And we find ourselves trying to define ourselves based on what we were taught or what we were told. And sometimes we don't realize we are lost. So for me, that is the best gift I could ever have for myself. And like now, the latest gift that I've realized, and no offense to anyone, and I told you that before, and you were shocked one day when you came here. And I said, no, and I said with a smile, and I'm not against the Bible, and I'm not against anyone who believes in the Bible, but me now. Because I realized me now for myself, for my soul, where was it before this thing was in existence? I've asked myself those questions and I found answers. That I'm starting to see. My eyes are opening up. No, so mabekhuluma nami bangitshela izinto bona ekufanele ngizilandele ezicreate yibo. So mina yinto ekhuluma ngami, into ekhuluma ngami, amasiko ami ukulayitha impepho ayibonanga mina eBhayibhelini ukulayitha impepho, ukuthi ukulayitha impepho angibonanga eBhayibhelini ukuthi idlozi la-acknowledge-wa, angibonanga leyo part. Idlozi la-acknowledge-wa, idlozi likhona, idlozi liyaphila. Angibonanga the only part engivumelana nayo ngeBhayibheli ukuthi singakhonzi abanye othixo, which for me I only worship the God above, but I don't relate to it, but I acknowledge my ancestors with pride. My ancestors are not darkness, my ancestors are not evil, my ancestors are living beings. I am going to be an ancestor one day, and I'll be offended if my sons and daughters, they don't acknowledge me. I'll be mad as hell. So I can imagine what my father had felt before I realized that I need to acknowledge him, my sisters, all the late, my uncles and my grannies and so forth and so on. So for me, that defines it.
There are 5 major questions that every religion or spiritual practice has to answer in order for all of us to embrace it. The first question is, where did I come from? The second one is, who am I? The third one is, why am I here? The fourth one is, what's the meaning of life? And the fifth one is, where am I going? And so for me, the reason why I am a Christian is I feel like Christianity, or believe that Christianity answers those 5 questions better than any belief or spiritual practice. Now, what Somizi is really asking is the question of who am I? And in defining who am I, he thinks that he needs to look to his physical appearance. So if the question is who am I, I'm black, right? And maybe even asking the question, where did I come from? And he's going to look at his ancestors, he's going to focus on that historical narrative and so on. And that's very important because God has created each and every one of us within a context. In other words, I've been created as a black South African living in South Africa, speaking in Xhosa, and it's God who actually has given me my Africanness. It's God that's created me the way that I am. And I should be grateful to God for being the way that I am. It's not something that I need to reject. It's something that I need to embrace and celebrate. But fundamentally speaking, when we're asking the question, who am I? We're not just asking the question of whether I'm an African, whether I'm black or white, but the question is so fundamental that it actually begs the question, what makes me different from a dog or a cat or a stone and so on? And so answering that question to say that I'm an African is only answering it in a small way. But when we go further, we actually can say I am human. I am human because I've been made in the image of God. I am human because I'm not a dog. I'm human because I have the ability to have a relationship with God. I've got the ability to love. I've got the creativity of God inside of me that I can reflect back to the world. And that is something that's not based on something that is physical. It's not based on things that can change. It is based on something that is a principle that never changes. Whether you're black or white, whether you're Hindu or not, what makes us all equal is the fact that we're made in the image of God. But if we define ourselves by the fact that we're black or white, then the problem actually begins to say that if I'm focusing so much on my cultural identity and I put that above everything else, well, then you've got to ask yourself the question, when the Europeans came to Africa, they came emphasizing the white culture over everything. And so then you are having people like Somizi saying, I'm emphasizing my African culture because it's always been demonized. But then at the same time, how do you condemn somebody coming here and actually prioritizing their own culture over every other culture? What do you say to them? What's their argument? Because they're not doing anything different from what you're doing. And so then it begs the question, even when we say, let's go and turn to African spirituality, to say that, well, what if people would come in the name of their spirituality and oppress us? Based on what can you say it's wrong? Because they can just say, I'm just implementing my European or Indian or Asian spirituality. What's your argument against that? What if they're saying it's my God versus your God and your God was defeated? What argument will you make? And so this is why we believe that there's no such thing as African spirituality or European spirituality. There is spirituality because in the spirit realm, there is no limitations like we have black, white, African, and so on. When you die, you become a spirit, and there's no spirit that is now an African spirit or a European spirit and so on. And so even when we connect to the divine, there's no God of Africa here. There's one God that created the whole world, and he created all people in his own image, making all of us equal. Now, the minute you say, this is my God, you're already opening it up to say that, well, my God is better than your God, and it opens things up like discrimination. But coming back to Somizi, when he says, I'm rejecting Christianity because I feel like the biblical narrative is a book written to me, but it's not about me. I think nothing can be further from the truth. If you look at the Bible from the very beginning, Genesis chapter 2, verse 13, you will see the four rivers that are mentioned in the Garden of Eden. One of them was in the land called Havilah. Havilah is debated. It could be in East Africa. It could be also in the Arabian Peninsula, but somewhere in the east around there. But the second river is mentioned, and it's said to be a river that is in the land of Cush. And Cush is modern-day Sudan. It's the land of Nubia, and that's mentioned from the very beginning in the Bible. But what about the patriarchs in the Bible, people like Abraham? Abraham traveled to Egypt. He's never been to Europe. He's never been to Athens and Rome and so on, but he's been to Africa. What about Jacob? Jacob spent the last years of his life in Egypt. In fact, his whole family, when there was a famine around the world and they wanted to escape famine, they ran to the land of Egypt. And we see this tradition being picked up by Jesus and his family as well. When they were under danger from King Herod, who wanted to kill them, they ran to Egypt. And so there you see Africa being affirmed as a place of significance, both in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. That when God's people were in danger, the place that they ran to was Egypt. Because we always emphasize Egypt being a place where Israel was saved out of. But we also forget to mention the fact that they were saved to Egypt before they were saved out of Egypt. In other words, when danger came of hunger and famine and so on, God used Africa to save his people, the same way that he did with Jesus as well. So you see that place as a place that is confirmed, that is a place of significance in the biblical narrative. But if we look at the story of Joseph, I think for me, there's no better story than the story of Joseph that affirms the dignity of the African continent and African people, like the story of Joseph. Joseph is somebody who obviously was sold into slavery by his family. Obviously, Egypt was practicing slavery in those days, but you're never going to hear about that. But he was sold into slavery by his family, and then he rose to prominence and he became a very important place in the land. But we're told that he was married to an Egyptian woman, and he had two sons from that Egyptian woman. Now, this is very interesting because if his wife was Egyptian, it means his sons were half Egyptian and half Hebrew, which would make them half African and half Hebrew. Now, interesting thing is when Jacob is coming at the end of his life and he wants to bless all of his sons, we're told that he actually chose not to incorporate Joseph into the narrative as one of the 12 tribes of Israel, but he said these two sons will be two half tribes of Israel. In other words, there's no tribe of Joseph, but there's the tribe of Manasseh, there's the tribe of Ephraim. And so those two tribes come together and they make one tribe. But it's very interesting to see the prominent people that came through those two tribes. You've got Joshua, who comes through from the tribe of Ephraim, and he was a prominent leader. And if you went up to him and said, what race are you? He would say, I'm half African and I'm half Hebrew at the same time. What about people like Gideon? Gideon was also from the tribe of Manasseh. He also had African heritage inside of him. And also even the first king of Israel, when Israel was divided into two kingdoms, Jeroboam was also from the tribe of Ephraim. And so you see in the biblical narrative the incorporation of African lineage and heritage included into this narrative, which no other continent can say, we can find ourselves in the narrative like the African people, like the Chinese can't see themselves in there. The Europeans can't see themselves in there, but we have been included in the narrative from day one. And you see even Solomon saying in the Bible, I'm black, but I'm beautiful, And so the identity and dignity of African people is already affirmed in the Bible. If that's what Somizi is looking for, it's already affirmed. But it's important that we move from finding our value and dignity from external things. Because if you look at Egypt, Egypt was once a great place in the world, and people would run to Egypt when they were hungry. But today we see Egyptians trying to cross the Mediterranean Sea to go to Europe, because now Europe is now a place that seems like it's more significant. And so the physical things can be manipulated. The value of a continent can be manipulated. It used to be Africa, now it's Europe. And so if we base it on the external, actually those are things that fluctuate, And recently watched a video from DJ Sbu, no Zakes Bantwini, and Zakes was talking about the fact that we as black people like to put on these expensive brands because we want this skin color to be affirmed. We want to add value to this skin color. But the problem is we're trying to put value in it based on things that are external, things that change, things that come and go. But I think it's important when we ground our value, we should ground it in the fact that we've been made in the image of God. We're fearfully and wonderfully made. And everything that God makes, it's wonderful. And so it doesn't matter if people say black is ugly. It doesn't matter if people say Africa is a dark continent. But when we know that we're made in the image of God and that everything that God makes is awesome and it's wonderful, we would ground our identity not in something that can change, not in something that people can manipulate, not in something that people can demonize, but actually we will ground ourselves in something that's not changing, that is a principle, that is timeless, that is there, that God has already said, this is who you are, this is who I've made you to be. And so it's important to know that you are who God says you are. You're not who other people say you are. You're not who even what your family says, actually, because when we're answering the identity question, it's important to know that it's the creator that gets to define us. It's like when you design a watch, you get to say that this is a watch. You get to say this is why it's important. But it's not the watch that can turn around and say, actually, I'm valuable because of this, or actually, no, I'm this, I'm not that. It actually all begins with the creator. Because even when you are acknowledging your ancestors, you got to always ask yourself the question, where did they come from? And ultimately, the last person that you're going to end with is the one that created. And so this is why in Christianity, we say we're defined by the fact that we're a child of God. We're a child of the creator. Our identity comes from the fact that we have a relationship with God. It's not based on the fact that I'm a Zulu or I'm a Xhosa, because ultimately all of us humans have one common ancestor according to the Bible. It all goes back to Noah and Adam. All of us can actually trace our lineage back to the same person as well. And so this is my response to Somizi, to say we've got to base it not on what is physical and what is seen. Yes, we embrace and celebrate our Africanness, but ultimately what makes us human are those things that really truly define us as people. This is Bistrat for Africa, a channel dedicated to giving you Christian commentary on religious and spiritual matters. So I'm going to be sitting on this topic of Africa and the Bible, and the next topic I'm going to be looking at is the Queen of Sheba, so the Ethiopian queen that met Solomon and so on. So really looking at the relationship between Africa and the Bible and the heritage, the rich heritage of Africa that is found in the Bible. Also, look out for our live stream tomorrow. We're going to be going live and talking about the historical Jesus. Is there any evidence of the existence of Jesus outside of the Bible? And so please subscribe. We're on a journey to 1,000 subscribers. If you haven't subscribed, there are big things coming in this channel. And so you want to subscribe, you want to hit the notification bell so that you can get notifications when we put out videos as well. We'll see you guys on the next video.